I never thought that I would see iconoclasm here in the United States. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think you could have gone fairly long periods of time throughout human history where you would never encounter iconoclasm, not actual destruction of art. And in my lifetime, I've been indirectly affected by it twice already. Once, in Afghanistan, the Taliban blew up two very famous Buddha statues. I think it's in Bamyan. I don't recall. And the second time that I encountered iconoclasm, not personally, but in the ancient city of Nineveh, modern-day Mosul, won't talk about it too much, but had an acquaintance who was there, and ISIS was destroying all the statues and art there in Nineveh, i.e. modern-day Mosul. I never thought something like that would happen in the United States. Here in Louisville, there used to be a statue behind me. And that's what I want to talk with you about. But not just that statue. I don't actually care to talk about that statue, the statue that was right here. I'd like to talk about what lies behind the statue, because it troubles me, and I'm deeply concerned about the future of the United States. I never thought, and I've already said this, but I never thought that I was going to see any practical, real-world things in one area of my doctoral degree. And I'm quite concerned that I have now. And that is the iconoclasm. Historically, people have talked about iconoclasm versus, iconoclasm versus iconophilia, as if it's a spectrum. And iconoclasm is literally the destruction of art, the destruction of icons, of images. And iconophilia is the love of them. And maybe loving them a little too much. I have a theory of art. You don't have to be on that spectrum. You can have entirely different viewpoints as well. One, for example, being what I'm just making this up. This is subject to change. But iconocaveism, and that is caution around things, just avoiding art specifically. Just avoid, I'm not going to destroy it, but I'm not going to have anything to do with it. I'm just going to separate myself from that. I'd like to be talking with you about the statue behind me, but the city of Louisville has removed it. It was called the John B. Castleman Monument or statue. It was a sculpture by Roland Hinton Perry. Perry was an exceptionally gifted artist working in different media. He wasn't just a painter, he was also a sculptor, and very well known and very talented. From what I recall of Perry, feel free to fact check this, but back when he was going to school in the late 1890s, I believe he went to Juilliard and he showed such exceptional promise that they accepted him into the academy in France. And that's when you know you've made it, by the way, is when you're able to just be like, yeah, the academy. I won't embarrass myself by trying to say like the Beaux Arts or whatever, but he was the only student accepted that year, the only American student accepted that year, and a very well-known sculptor and painter. Subsequently, he came back and he did the Neptune Fountain in Washington, D.C., fairly famous. If you're a Pennsylvanian, then you'll see that he did, and you've been to the Capitol building there, he did, I don't remember what it's called, like Miss Pennsylvania or whatever. I think it's technically called Commonwealth. The statue behind me, the John B. Castleman, started getting vandalized. You can actually see on the base, maybe, I'm not looking at my camera, so I'm not sure if I'm showing it to you right, but you can see orange stuff. That's, I believe that's the remnants of paint that was thrown onto the statue to vandalize it, and subsequently fell onto the base. I'm almost 100% certain that you can still see, oh, and there, yeah, I'm just trying to show you the sidewalk. You can even see those orange drops. There's, you know, the paint is still there. Where unknown parties, I don't know who did it. I'm not sure anybody does, and whoever does isn't talking. But they started vandalizing this statue that was here. And the stated reason that they did so was because John B. Castleman was a Confederate. He was an officer in the Confederate Army when he was a young man, 1920, something like that. The B in Castleman stands for Breckenridge, by the way, and there's a Breckenridge Road here in town. Breckenridge is a fairly prominent name, and I haven't done any historical digging to see how, if at all, Castleman was related to those Breckenridges, or who knows. Anyway, the statue was very imposing. It was really cool, because it was tall, and he was riding a horse. And when you drove down this two-sided road coming up here, you could see that statue from a long way away, like, whoa, look at that giant guy on a horse. So the stated reason that people figured that the statue kept getting vandalized was because he was a Confederate. But that's such a short-sighted view, not only of Castleman as a person, but of art and the public role of art. Now, this was one of Louisville's. I mean, it's not like we had a lot of Perrys around. This was our one statue by Roland Hinton Perry, and it belonged to the public. I'm not an ethicist, but when you do something wrong to one person, we're like, that's bad. But when you do something wrong to more people, that's even worse. For mass murder is worse than murder, and stealing from a lot of people is worse than stealing from one, and setting fire to your own business is bad. But if you set fire to, if you are an arson on a national forest, that's even worse. We could go on. So, it's not just that our city administration caved and, let vandals win. That's actually not like my big gripe. My big problem is that art has value apart from its contents, apart from its references. Art has value apart from the things it's depicting, if it's representational. The work itself has value, or could have value, possibly, no matter who or what it's of. If it's high quality art, that in itself is good and instructive. It doesn't necessarily mean that the public should fund it. It doesn't mean that it should be forced on people. And I'm not saying that there's not art out there that's immoral. This statue was not of Castleman as a Confederate. He was riding a horse, but he wasn't in military gear. This was not of him fighting for the Confederates. And I've seen sources online that say that Castleman had a change of heart at some point later in his life than when he was a teen or in his early 20s, and came to be treasured by the African American community here in Louisville. They apparently said really nice things about him when he passed away. So again, but however, it's not just about the short-sightedness of taking down a statue in response to cowards vandalizing it. That's not the point either. The reason that the statue of Castleman was put up was because Castleman had been known as the, quote, father of Louisville's parks. Okay, big deal. The thing was, we have amazing parks here in Louisville. Not just one, tons of them. Tons of acreage. All the kinds of different parks that I know to exist. From lots of trails with beautiful scenery. In fact, Cherokee Park surrounds some of this area, and it's so beautiful that I think that between it and the architecture, people are like, yeah, I'd like to live there. We have an extensive and beautiful park system, and it's my understanding that Castleman donated money and land to the parks. And that's why there's a statue of him, not because he was a Confederate. I mean, there was thousands of Confederates. And not every one of them got a statue. So it's not just about who this statue was of, that he was a Confederate, that he fought for the Confederates. It's not just the fact that he had a change in heart, and if he hadn't had a change in heart, still no statue. It's not even the fact that this was our only Perry, and that there's not just tons of them out there, and that this was, in some real senses, priceless. It's not because of the historical significance of the man or the monument. Listen, all art is made by sinful people. If you have a proper understanding of theology, then you have at least a partial understanding of a biblical anthropology telling you about us people. And the Bible is explicitly clear that all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. So you will never find art that was made by people who don't commit actions that are rebellious against God. Sins. Sinful people. Not just little mistakes. Odious sins that offend a most righteous and holy God. You're not going to find any art like that by humans out there. Most of the time, people that get statues, monuments made for them, did so because the people making it felt like they did a good thing. And a Christian who understands theology realizes that all have fallen short. There is no one who is good. There is no one who is perfect. That's not why you get a statue. It's because you're a significant person, a person who made changes or did things that influenced or affected a ton of people. Not always even for the better, but just like, wow, this was an important person. At the same time, everybody knows that a great deal of the models who sat for portraits in the past, even if they were, like, okay, we're going to do a picture of Jesus, or there's going to be a picture of Mary, the mother of Jesus, or whatever. Those were real people that were sitting for the portrait or whatever. Often prostitutes, models would be, models would sometimes prostitute themselves. And they were looking for beautiful young ladies, and that, if we got rid of all the art that featured flawed people, deeply flawed people, sinful people, we'd have no art. So I'm offering us a fourth way. It's not the historical way of destroying art. It's not the alternative way of worshiping art. It's not the way that was very popular among the traditions of Christian religion that I kind of descend from in the one historical sense, where my spiritual forebears tended to just avoid art. Safer to avoid it. Instead, I'm proposing a fourth way. A fourth way is that we can welcome art. We can welcome the good things made by deeply evil people. We can accept and embrace and enjoy the good things made by even really flawed people. You may notice, for example, because you may be thinking, well, Daniel, what if they were a really horrible person, like a pedophile, or a racist, or whatever whatever your culture right now thinks is the worst possible sin. But I want to point out, we don't just have this sculpture's pedestal behind us. We've also got beautiful architecture. I mentioned this earlier, but this area has lovely houses, really eclectic and beautiful. I don't know who designed that building right there, but it's beautiful. And I can appreciate that and enjoy it, not knowing their sins, not knowing how sinful they were or what they did. I have more to say about what I've learned happens after people start tearing down statues. I look forward to talking with you more next time.